by Shem Yahushua. Fisherman Fazaya, I'm back with another video through the spirit and the power of Yahweh by Shem Yahushua. I'm trying to plug this up so I can charge this up real quick so it won't die. Shabbat Shalom. All praises, glory, honor to Yahweh in the name of his son, Yahushua. Yahweh, who we know according to the Paleo Hebrew as God, in the name of his son, Yahushua, who we know according to Jesus the Christ. Come before you through the spirit and the power of Yahweh Shem Yahushua. Don't count this as a light thing to do. All praises, glory, honor to Yahweh in the name of his son, Yahushua. So like you bear with me. Let me get this charged up real quick. Shabbat Shalom to those keeping the Shabbat Friday sundown, Saturday sundown. Lord willing, you enduring in these last days to the best of your ability. Striving, call Allah Yahweh by Shem Yahushua. So like the title says, we're going to be touching on a few things through the spirit. Let me pull it up. Let me pull it up. Like the title says, it says, addressing the comment board, scoffers, haters, demons, plus do you really love this truth? So from time to time again, we have to touch on people comments and things like that, like we do on the highways and byways. People may have comments on the highways and byways. People may have comments. They may be tossed to and fro. They may not know what's going on. So we kind of got to give the sense and establish the word of the Most High God in righteousness. So let me get this in 1 John real quick, you know. So we kind of got to make sure everybody is getting the truth, because the Lord said in Matthew 24:14, this gospel shall be preached in all the world, and then shall the end come. Now this is 1 John chapter 2 and verse 24. It says, let that therefore abide in you, which ye have heard from the beginning. If that which ye have heard from the beginning shall remain in you, ye also shall continue in the Son and in the Father. So a lot of people hasn't remained in the Most High. They haven't remained in the truth. They may be tossed to and fro. They may be all over the place. They may be stumbling across false doctrines. They may be teaching false doctrines. So, you know, you got people from time to time come on the comment board just saying any and everything. You know, sometimes you may have to address certain things. Sometimes, hey, you just got to let them do what they do. You know, the blind leading the blind. You know, they also have to ask yourself, do you really love the truth? Now, I want to get another precept real quick. Now, we are addressing the comment board, but we are addressing things from previously. Now, on the first main channel, it says, are you hungry? You know, SRR, you know. I'm eating the words of life, you know. So I'm getting my food right now. I'm reading the Bible and I'm teaching the Bible. And also on this comment board, I can't really read this comment board. I can't see what they said. Jessica Turnbull on the backup channel said hi, peace and blessings. I'm not sure. Hold on, let me see. Trying to go back right here. So gaming with Yashar Raj, hey, Delvana Nastaya. So like if I'm butchering your name, hi dude, where are you from? Originally, I'm from the motherland. You know, I've been brought to America, you know, during the regeneration, if you can understand, for disobeying the Most High. But I'm an Israelite, you know. But you can find me in Fayetteville, North Carolina. You know, come to Fayetteville, North Carolina. Faisal Yankee, brother, what do you think about the children of Gaza, Palestine? If they're not Israelites, hey, they getting jammed up, according to Isaiah 14. That's what I think about them. They're going to be servants and handmaids. Matava Kolovko, sound like a Russian name. Ray Game, child of Satan. I'm not sure if Ray Game saying he's a child of Satan or he's saying I'm a child of Satan. So, hey, we are addressing the comment board, though. But if you got questions, hey, ask your questions. Lord willing, I can get to it if I see it. But I am addressing some things according to other comments previously on the old on videos from back a couple weeks ago. Now, let me get this real quick because I had took a picture. Because let me show this real quick. According to some of the comments that was made on previous videos, I do want to touch on this. Now, this is from, when is this from? This is from, this might have been like a week ago. Somebody in the comment board said, get a job. Now, this is Justin B. Hey, Justin B, if you up here, hey, look, you got to tap in now. Now, I'm not sure if you can see that. Now, this is Justin B. He said, get a job. So this is for edification purposes. Now, just edification purposes. Now, if you're a man, you do supposed to be working. Now, I want to get this according to Genesis. Genesis chapter 30. If you're a man, if you're a single man, you should be working. If you're a married man, you should be working. So I'm gonna touch on this comment from the comment board because, like I said in the title, we are addressing comments. You know, Palestine, SRR said, Palestine or Israel, who do you think they are? Palestine or Israel? The people in Israel, they're the Amalekites. The people in Palestine, they aren't the ancient Palestinians, but, you know, they go back to Ishmael. Manosa, I'm not sure what that says. Tavelin, how are you? Hey, I'm well through the spirit and the power of the Most High. You know, so let's get this real quick. And I done lost my precept. Now this is Genesis chapter 30, verse 30. So we touching on what this individual said a couple weeks, maybe last week. The first comment that I want to touch on, this individual said, get a job. I'm not sure if he was directly saying it to me, but if you can see that. So if you are a man, you should be working. Well, very well, you should be working. So let's get Genesis chapter 30 and verse 30. Now, a woman can work too, but, you know, that depends on what her, if she's not married, it depends on how her father is running his house. And if she is married, it depends on how her husband is running that house. Now, this is Genesis chapter 30, and I'm going to start at verse 28, and it reads, and he said, appoint me thy wages, and I will give it. And he said unto him, thou knowest how I have served thee, and how thy cattle was with me. For it was little which thou hast before I came, and it is now increased unto a multitude, and the Lord had blessed thee since my coming. And now when I shall provide for my own house also. So, hey, our forefather Jacob, he provided for his own house, you know. So, hey, we have to provide for ourselves. We have to provide. If you're a man that has a wife, you have to provide for your wife. If you're a man that has children, you have to provide for your children, you know. And you got single mothers out here that provide for their households, you know, even though we are under the curses and we dealing with the curses. So a lot of things, you know, you can't escape the curses. Now, Adam, Adam also was working, you know, he was naming the cattle. He wasn't just sitting around living under his grandmother or his grandfather. He, you know, which that's another thing a lot of people don't really understand, and they're not really knowledgeable in. They think Adam was just the first man on earth. How is Adam the first man on earth if when you read Genesis 2 it says leave thy father and thy mother, cleave to thy wife, and the wife cleaved to her husband, you know? So Adam, he was doing the work. Now this is Genesis chapter 2 and verse 19. And out of the ground the Lord God formed every beast of the field and every fowl of the air, and brought them unto Adam to see what he would call them. And whatsoever Adam called every living creature, and that was the name thereof. And Adam gave names to all cattle, and to the fowl of the air, and to every beast of the field. But for Adam there was not found an helpmeet for him. So the Lord allowed certain men to be on a level to where they're not only doing regular work as far as occupations, because you had farmers, you had those that had to till the ground, you have men that, as well as women, they was gleaning, you know, they was getting the wheat, and they was doing things in the field, gathering the crops. So we as a people, we were subject to work, you know. So like the comment, somebody left a comment, says, get a job. Now, I'm not sure if he was saying I didn't have a job, because he was seeing me doing videos all the time, random times of the day, you know, but I work different hours, you know. I don't work just regular hours like everybody else work, you know. I work 12 hours, and even though it is the Sabbath, you know, we only discussing this for edifying purposes, you know. I don't just work random hours like other people do. I work different hours throughout the week, you know. So Ray Game said that was extra. I can't see a lot of these messages. We are addressing the comment board though, you know. Chosen One said, may the Most High God bless you with prosperity in many good ways all the days of your life. All praise to the Most High. Peace and blessings to you. Octavian, I pick Israel. You know, I'm not sure if you're saying you're an Israelite, but the people that are in Israel right now, those are Amalekites. Somebody said free Palestine. Zupi, Frud, Game, RO, Scam, Bro, FRCKU. I'm not sure if he was saying F me, but if that's the case, hey, all praise to the Most High. You know, the Lord will judge those that mock the Lord's servants and his messengers. So Zupi, Frud, Game, Ro, Scam, hey, peace and blessings to you. You know, if you a heathen, hey, live it up, because your time is going to be cut short, you know. And I appreciate your kind message. All praise to the Most High for your kind message. Because if you aren't an Israelite, you should hate me. Because sooner or later, you will be a servant unto me, Lord willing, if I'm of the elect. You know. So, hey, we do got scoffers on the comment board too. Now, I want to get this. Now, 2 Peter. Before we get back to finishing what the person said in previous videos from last week, get a job. Now, you do have scoffers and haters and demons in the comment board, which all well, they said and did the same thing to the Lord and to the prophets and the men that came before us. Now, this is 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 3, and it says, knowing this first, that there shall come in the last days scoffers walking after their own lusts, you know. So, hey, you're going to walk after your own lust. You're going to be on the comment board saying all type of stuff. You know, Azura reincarnated, lots of trolls and bots. Continue putting in the work, brothers. All praise to the Most High. You know, we do know there's bots up here as well. You know, AI is running rampant, and it's a lot of madness up here. They don't want the word to continue to go out, so we do understand that. Peace and blessing to you, Azura reincarnated. You know, so let me read this one more time. 2 Peter 3 and 3. It says, knowing this first, that there shall come in the last days. So we living in the last days. And how we know we live in the last days? Because the Lord said many things will befall us. Let me get a precept real quick to understand and show how we know we living in the last days. Now this is Matthew chapter 24, the classic. And I'm gonna start at verse 3. Matthew chapter 24 and verse 3, and it says, and as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, the disciples came unto him privately, saying, tell us, when shall these things be? And what shall be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world? So what can we see and know that we're living in the last days? You know, what can we know? What can we look for? You know, what can you reveal to us and how we know we're living in the last days? And this is what the Messiah said. He said, verse 4, and Yahweh answered and said it to them, take heed that no men deceive you. So we have been deceived, you know, not just only 1492, you know, when the Caucasians came over here and overthrew the northern kingdom. You're not just only in the 1600s, you know, not just only in 1619, not just only in the 1900s, but we've been deceived, you know, even in 70 AD, you know. So, hey, we got to understand that we're living in the last days. And the Lord said, let's go back to 2 Peter chapter 3 and verse 3. Chosen One said, keep it 100, my brother. All praise to the Most High. You know, let me check this comment board right here. Nobody else commented on this one. So this is 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 3. It says, knowing this first, that there shall come in the last days scoffers walking after their own lusts and saying, where is the promise of his coming? So you're going to have many people saying, you said 2,000 years ago that the Messiah was going to come back. You've been saying this, and people going to say many things. You know, they've been saying the chosen one is going to come, and they're gonna scoff and say many things, but they just only allowing themselves to be led by the spiritual demon Satan. You know, 2 Peter 3:4, and saying, where is the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of the creation. So many people that follow after their own lust, that follow after their own ways, that allow Satan to deceive them and use them and allow themselves to be on the left-hand side, they're going to be saying, hey, look, nothing is going to happen. No prophecies is going to be revealed. The end times is not here. They're going to be saying many things according to wickedness and folliness and moving in the spirit of the spiritual demon Satan. 2 Peter 3:5, for this they willingly are ignorant of, that by the word of God, the heavens were of old, and the earth standing out of the water and in the water, whereby the world that then was, being overflown with water, perisheth. But the heavens and the earth, which are now, by the same word are kept in store, reserved unto fire against the day of judgment and perdition of ungodly men. So a lot of people, hey, they just gonna be moving in the same spirit that they was moving in during the days of Noah. And that's what the Lord is saying. Let me read that real quick. Matthew chapter 24, latter chapter. Matthew 24, and I'm gonna start at verse 37. It says, but as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and knew not until the flood came and took them all away. So shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. So a lot of people are going to still be operating in that same fashion, just in a modern time, just in a different look, wearing different clothes, you know, might have a different hairstyle. They may have a different slang, how they talk and how they reveal certain things and communicate with one another. That's the same way that it says in 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 7. And I also want to get another precept, Isaiah 28, real quick. So still addressing the comment board, but we mainly touching on comments from the old videos before we touch on new comments. Gouda God said, I just got here. Bro, who is El and Elyon and Asherah? He also said we moving in the days of Canaanite right now, serving pagan gods. Yeah, we are moving in the days of pagan gods. People worshiping pagan gods, and the Lord gonna cut down those people that's moving in that spirit. El and Elyon and Asherah. I'm not sure if he's talking about this false god, but there's many different false gods that have different names. Let me get this precept real quick in Isaiah. Now I wanted to get Isaiah 28, but I'm also gonna get another precept. Let me get this precept real quick if I can remember where it is. Now this is Isaiah. I want Isaiah. It's a precept in Isaiah that I want. Now this is Isaiah chapter. Two precepts that I want to get, but I want to get this first. This is Isaiah chapter 43. And I want to start at verse. I want to start at verse 13. I'm going to start at verse 12. This is Isaiah 43:12. It says, I have declared and have saved, and I have shewed when there was no strange God among you. So before there was before there was religions and before there was false gods, there was only one true and living power. Now these other gods don't have any power, you know. Therefore ye are my witnesses, said the Lord Yahweh, that I am most high God. Yea, before the day was I. It says, yea, verse 13, Isaiah 43:13. Yea, before the day was I am he. And there is none that can deliver out of my hand. I will work, and who shall let it? Thus said the Lord, your Redeemer, the Holy One of Israel. For your sake I have sent to Babylon, and have brought down all their nobles and Chaldeans, whose cry is in the ships. I am the Lord, your Holy One. the creator of Israel, your king. So before there was any false gods, you know, there was always the Most High Yahweh, the Almighty. You know, before time was even a known thing. Now I want to get another precept, but I want to go to the Apocrypha though. Now this is Wisdom of Solomon. I just thought about this through the Spirit. Wisdom of Solomon. Let me see. Wisdom of Solomon. Let me check this other comment board real quick. Wisdom of Solomon, and I want to get chapter 14. This is Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 14, and I want to start at verse 11. Wisdom of Solomon in the Apocrypha. And if you don't have an Apocrypha, you know, or if you may just be new, we always recommend that you get an Apocrypha, you know, 16 and 11. But I got my 16 and 11 in the house, you know, so I'm not able to show you right now, but this is the Apocrypha. Now, if you got a Bible out, if you're new to this, if you're new to the truth, you can get a Bible out. Now, if you got, I don't know, if there's any Apple users over here, you can go to the Bible app and you can kind of just, now the Bible app with the Apocrypha on it, if you on Apple, you can kind of go to the Bible app and it looks like this. If you're Apple users, but I'm not sure how it looks according to the Android users. Now, real quick, let me see. You could just, if you got Apple, you could just go to the Bible store. And even if you're a heathen, you still should be doing this, because you should be studying your history too. So like, before we get back in the word, I want to put this up here. So if you go to the Bible app, all you got to do is just type in Apocrypha, and it'll show up just like that. Now, if you got an Android, I'm not sure how it's going to show up on the Android. You know, good God, it says we have to call him by his name, Yahuwah. That's not the name, you know. No U's were in the Paleo Hebrew alphabet. 22 characters in the Paleo Hebrew. The name he gave Moshe in the burning bush, I read the Geneva 2599 that predicts the King James version. Yeah, but that wasn't the authorized Bible, according to all the scholars that King James had allowed to. Let me show you something real quick. King James, you know, scholarship, so-called black man from the tribe of Judah, had 54 scholars to allow another language to be translated out of the scrolls, you know. So let me read something according to what we need to be informed with. Now, this is a Negro man. This is King James, you know. Now, you can get this book. This is the Negro Question, Part 4, the missing link, you know. Get you some scholarship. Now, this is King James. He was a ruler over, you know, many of, well, you have a lot of Caucasians in rulership right now. I'm going to read this for you real quick. It says, King James came from a long line of black Scottish Stuart kings, 343 years of rulership in Scotland. The Stuarts not only ruled in Scotland, they ruled France, Spain, Ireland, and England, Britain, Wales. King James was able to rule all of these lands because all these people were Iberian, meaning black descent. All right. They were the same people. If you look at the ball in his hands, see that ball, there's a representation to a Negro man being in rulership. You know, it said if you look at the ball in his hands, it represents world rulership. And this is on page 9 that I'm reading from. If you look at the ball in his hands, it represents world rulership. And there was only one other group of world leaders who used this type of symbolism, and they were the Byzantine Roman emperors, you know. So you had Scottish kings that was ruling during a certain time period in the late 1300s all the way to the 1700s. And this is a list, if you can see that, you know, and you can get this book if it's still up for sale. You know, these are Israelites that ruled in Scotland, And even when you look at the beginning of your Bible, you know, I know a lot of people, they think King James was a white man or Caucasian. They thought he was a homosexual. But even in the front of your Bible, mine's is not in the best shape. But even when you look in the front of the Bible, you know, it tells you, you know, it says the Most High and Mighty Prince, James, by the grace of God, King of Great Britain, France, and Ireland, defender of the faith, the translators of the Bible, which grace, mercy, and peace through Yahweh Shah Mashiach our Lord. So they not only translated different things in the Bible, but they also believed in the words of life too. Now, good gad, I got another book that yes, according it is $15.99. I'm aware of that. Now, I do got another book that's inside the house right now that I also wanted to touch on too, where it talks about the Geneva Bibles and it talks about these other books, you know, but the most authentic that we should be ascribing to is the King James, you know. And there's nothing wrong with comparing and contrasting with different translations too, but staying on topic, you know, we are aware of the council that he allowed. Now, what this other comment board? Now, going back to Wisdom of Solomon and the Apocrypha, as well as King James, you know, you can't see it right here, but you know, it is the King James version. So Wisdom of Solomon 14:11, it says, therefore, even upon the idols of the Gentiles shall there be a visitation, because the creature of God, they are become an abomination and stumbling blocks to the souls of men, and a snare to the feet of the unwise. So it's going to be a snare to you if you're unwise, if you're not learning, if you're not studying, if you're not keeping the commandments, if you don't have faith on Yahweh Shah HaMashiach, if you don't hope in the Lord. Now, going down to verse 27, Wisdom of Solomon 14:27, it says, for the worshiping of idols not to be named is the beginning, the cause, and the end of all evil. You know, so like it says in Exodus chapter 20, thou shalt have no other gods before me. You know, so still touching on this comment from a week ago. I'm gonna pull it up and put it on the screen so you can see it and know where I'm coming from. Now, this is about a week ago. You know, Justin B said, get a job. You know, I have not yet seen Justin B come on the comment board today. You know, I'm not sure if he was just only popping up for that one time. But you got to understand, hey, the Messiah, he was working, you know. And also what I'm saying is, Adam, Adam, you know, had a job. So you should have a job, but also outside of your regular occupation and you slaving, you paying taxes, you also, if you have the knowledge that you're Israelite, if you have the wisdom, the knowledge and understanding, if you have the sense of learning and studying God's word, your spiritual job is to teach God's word as well, you know, to be in God's word, you know. Yes, I'm familiar with Exodus 3:13 through 15, brother. The good of God, Salaki for butchering your name. It says the Sefer Bible had all the Hebrew names, including the name Yahuwah. Now, we don't subscribe to the Sefer Bible. We understand that a lot of folklore and folk tales and fables is in the book of Enoch, and it doesn't line up with the Holy Bible, the 16:11, as well as the Sefer Bible. Now, I can touch on the Sefer Bible as well. There's some contradictions in there and a lot of madness that doesn't line up with the Bible. But I'll touch on that in time to come. Lord willing, we can touch on that today, you know. But let me finish this real quick. Now, Mark chapter 6. Now, the Messiah, he also worked. Trying to stay on task. He also worked. Now, this is Mark chapter 6. And I'm going to start at verse 2. And it says, and when the Sabbath day was come, he began to teach in the synagogue, and many hearing him were astonished and saying, from whence had this man these things? You know. It says, from whence had this man these things, and what wisdom is this which is given unto him, that even such mighty works are wrought by his hands? Is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary? So, hey, they knew he was a carpenter. You know, they knew what his occupation was. You know, but it's not only your occupation, you also should be working in this ministry. You should be teaching the word. Now, like Justin B said in that comment a week ago, my other job is to teach the words of God. You know, to go on the highways and byways, as well as doing videos and different lessons. You know, many different people aren't able to go to camp. You know, so we also have to be mindful that we have to use the internet, because the Lord said in Daniel chapter 12, you know, verse 2 on down, as well as verse 4, that knowledge shall be increasing these last days. And how can you increase that knowledge? You can come on YouTube, you can study, you know, you can look at different videos, you can increase your learning and things like that. You know, so Mark chapter 6 and verse 3, it says, is not this carpenter the son of Mary, the brother of James and Joseph, and of Judah and Simon, and are not his sisters here with us? And they were offended at him. So I also want to get Ephesians real quick. Ephesians chapter 4. Now, this is Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 11. Still touching on the comment of what Justin B said a week ago about getting a job. Another way of understanding a man having a job, you have to provide physically as well as spiritually. So if a man had a wife, it's not only his responsibility to pay those bills, to bring food into the house, and I'm pretty sure you also have to fix things, because a lot of times I own my house, so I had to fix things inside my house too. I have to, or unless you're gonna be spending money out there behind, paying different people to come and to tax you 20 times over, 100 times, 1,000 times over. Sometimes you have to get your hands dirty. You have to learn plumbing. You have to learn many different trades. You know, in this society, if you want to try to save money, as much money as possible. So outside of paying bills, you also have to teach your wife, teach your children. And if you're a mother, you also have to teach your children too. You know, read Deuteronomy chapter 6 and verse 4 on down. The Lord commands that we teach our children. So teaching our wives, our children, and teaching our brothers and sisters is also our job as well. You know, so Ephesians chapter 4 and 11, and it reads, it says, and he gave some apostles and some prophets and some evangelists and some pastors and teachers for the perfecting of the saints, for the work of the ministry, for the edifying of the body of Christ. So that's what the Lord commanded. And why would he do that if it wasn't a responsibility to teach? You know, because that's like a job. You know, that's like a job that we have to look into, and it's our responsibility to make sure the words of life are put on the front line. You know, we have to make sure we understand the task. Let me get this real quick before we continue to move on. So it says in Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 12, for the perfecting. So the Lord gave you all of this, and a teacher, that's something he looks at in the high regards. That's a big deal. You know, that's a very high office. You know, even though he might be a plumber, he might be a welder, he might be a truck driver, it's also a job teaching the Bible. You know, and I'm not talking about a Christian pastor. I'm not talking about a bishop in a big church, a mega congregation in a football stadium making millions of dollars. I'm talking about these brothers that you see on highways and byways. They also have other jobs, and those other jobs is teaching the Bible, you know. Now, Good Gad said, did Abba Givens, I'm pretty sure he's saying Abba Bivens give you these teachings? The Holy Spirit gave me these teachings, you know. It says, my Allah replied to Moshe, his name is Ahiah, Asher Ahiah. I read the book of Enoch. Yeah, you going off. You know, the book of Jubilees, Jasher, all them books related to my Allah. I don't have the authority to chose what? You know, yeah, if you in the book of Jubilees, you all over the place. If you're in the book of Enoch, You're all over the place, you know. So hey, you know, you jammed up. I'm just being honest with you. Just being honest with you. Because when you go to Jubilees 46 and 9, it says, and the king of Egypt went forth to war with the king of Canaan. And in the 47th Jubilee, in the second week, in the second year, and the children of Israel brought forth all the bones of the children of Jacob, save the bones of Joseph, and they buried them in the field, in the double cave in the mountains. But when you go to the book of Joshua, chapter 24, verse 32, it says, and the bones of Joseph with the children of Israel brought up out of Egypt, buried they in Shechem. So that's letting you know the book of Jubilees is off, because it's not really speaking the truth according to what Joshua actually did, you know, and what the children of Israel did with the bones of Joseph. Now this is in Jubilees 46 and 9. And then when you go to Joshua 24 and 32, it's not lining up, you know. Now when you go, if you listen to Abba Givens, you jam, brother. He was a disciple of Small Hats. Well, I just told you the Holy Spirit had breathed on me, you know. Just told you that. Meaning the Lord have awakened me to know that the Messiah is the King of Kings. And his name is Yahweh, you know. But we understand that it's going to be many different congregations, you know. Now, you can't get on me for speaking the truth. Now, I'm showing you how you got contradictions in the Jubilees, you know. I haven't even touched on Enoch yet. So when you go to Jubilees 30 and 7, hopefully you're following along with me. So when you go to Jubilees 30 and 7, you know, and the Sefer also has problems with that as well. Now, it says, and if there is any man who wishes in Israel to give his daughter or his sister to any man who is of the seed of the other nations, he shall surely die, and they shall stone him with stones, for he has wrought shame in Israel. And they shall burn the woman with fire, because she has dishonored the name of the house of her father, and she shall be rooted out of Israel. But when you go to Deuteronomy chapter 7, verses 1 through 3, check this out. It's contradictions in the Jubilees now, because the Jubilees is trying to contradict the Torah, which there's no contradictions in the Holy Bible. Asura Reincarnated, it says, how many verses a day would you recommend reading a day? How many verses a day would you recommend reading a day? Well, I recommend you read, first off, whatever your spirit is dealing with. If you're dealing with covetousness, you know, you need to deal with that spirit, you know. If you're dealing with homosexuality, you need to deal with that spirit. So if your spirit is heavy, you know, you have to examine yourself. You should be examining yourself whether you got demons that you're aware of or not. So, you know, depending on how your day is, brother, you know, or sister, I'm not really sure. Depending on how your day is. Now, if you work 12 hours, you know, sometimes, hey, 3 chapters may not be enough, because you may get jammed up on the job. You might have to read more. You might have to read 3 more chapters, you know. So it just depends on how your day is set up and how you plan your day out, which you should be planning your days out. We're going to get back to the Jubilees, but first let me get this real quick. You know, I can't really touch on every comment right off the top, or I can't really touch on the comment board as we go along, but trying to do things decently and in order. But I'm going to read this right quick, what the Apostle Paul told us. Now, let me get this precept real quick. I just read this not too long ago. Let me see. Let me find it. Salaki. Now, this is 1 Timothy chapter 4, and I'm going to start at verse 13. 2 Timothy 4:13. It says, till I come, give attendance to reading, to exhortation, to doctrine. So you should be reading. You know, reading helps, your spirit be maintained on a spiritual level, you know, because if you go a day without eating food, you're gonna be jammed up. More so if you go 3 days without eating food, you're gonna be jammed up. Go 7 days without eating food, you're gonna be jammed up, you know. So how you put food in your body, you also have to put the words of God, the words of life into your spirit. So Paul said, 1 Timothy 4 and 13, it says, till I come, give attendance to reading, to exhortation, to doctrine. You see that? So we have to continue to read. Now, also, let's see what the Messiah said. Yahweh Shah HaMashiach, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Let's go to Matthew chapter 4 and verse 4, and it reads, it says, but he answered and said, it is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeded out of the mouth of Most High God. And that pertains to Deuteronomy chapter 8 and verse 3. So, hey, look, you're going to have to just plan your day out depending on how your day is. I can't really put a number on it. I can't really emphasize it because I don't really know, you know, what truly goes on in your day-to-day lives. You know, you may have children, you may not have children, you know, so you may have a lot of responsibilities, you know, and Paul said that a lot of times your responsibilities will overlap, you know, a lot of things that you will be subject to as far as your spirit. Like, for instance, if you was a wife, if you was a woman, you know, a woman is not going to move the same, a married woman is not going to move the same way as a virgin or a single woman, you know. So I also want to read this, and then I want to get back to these Jubilee contradictions. Now, let's go to 1 Corinthians real quick. 1 Corinthians chapter 7. 1 Corinthians chapter 7, and I want to start at verse. I want to get straight to the point. 1 Corinthians chapter 7. And I'm going to start at verse 33. 1 Corinthians 7 and 33, it says, but he that is married carry for the things that are of the world, how he may please his wife. Now, that's not saying you shouldn't be on the highways and byways teaching. That's not saying you shouldn't be doing lessons on YouTube or any other website to where you can spread forth the gospel. What that is saying is you have to examine yourself. You have to move in a certain way that you can do things decently and in order. You know, if you got a wife and kids, we can't move the same way we used to move with Peter, James, and John, and the apostles was with Yahweh Shah. You know, that was showing us what is to come, you know. And more so, we have to be in subjection and be in order, you know, because our wives need to be taught, our children need to be taught. But if you didn't have a wife, then that's on a different scale. You know, and it's going to explain this in this chapter, 1 Corinthians 7 and 33. It says, so like, I think I kind of wanted this. I'm going to go down. 1 Corinthians 7 and 32, it says, but I will have you without carefulness. He that is unmarried cared for the things that belong to the Lord, how he may please the Lord. So whether or not you married or not married, you should be focused on pleasing the Lord, you know. But if you are married, you also got to please your wife. You got to please and if you're a woman, you got to please your husband. 1 Corinthians 7 and 33, but he that is married cared for the things that are of the world, how he may please his wife. There is difference also between a wife and a virgin. The unmarried woman cared for the things of the Lord, that she may be holy both in body and in spirit. So if you don't have a spouse, if you don't have children, you know, you should be reading more than somebody that don't, you know, because somebody that doesn't have a wife and children, you know, they can't do the things that a woman that has a husband and a man that has a wife do. So you should be hitting every point as far as what you deal with in the flesh. Like if a lust spirit try to come over you, you can't go lay down with just any and everybody or just a random person. You don't have a wife and a husband, you know. So you got to be in the word more, you know. And even people that are married, they may deal with these same things, and they should be in the word as well when they deal with these things, you know. it says, 1 Corinthians 7:34, there is a difference also between a wife and a virgin. The unmarried woman careth for the things of the Lord, that she may be holy both in body and in spirit. But she that is married careth for the things of the world, how she may please her husband. And her husband, he got to care for the things, how he may please his wife as well. So, you know, this is what we got to understand. Verse 35, and this I speak for your own profit, not that I may cast a snare upon you, but for that which is comely, and that ye may attend upon the Lord without distraction. So we also got to attend upon the Lord without distraction. So, you know, Asura reincarnated, it depends on your day. It depends on how your day is set up. And it also depends on your spirit, you know. Because if you read 10 chapters, you know, is that profitable? Is that expedient? You know, can you maintain what you've got out of those 10 chapters? Can you give a summary of what you got out of those 10 chapters? Can you break those 10 chapters down? You know, so you want to be balanced. You know, you kind of want to get into the law. You want to get into the statutes and the judgments. You want to get into your history. You want to get into prophecy, you know, so you can kind of get into many different things. Now, I got certain things that may help me. Hey, in the house, I keep stuff. And when I'm in the car, I keep stuff. So, hey, look, sometimes you can kind of get into stuff like this. You know, I had my wife kind of laminate certain things. So you got to make this truth very, very passionate, and you got to be enthusiastic in his truth. You got to be creative in his truth. You know, certain stuff like this. You got to get into the history. I mean, this is just basic stuff. This is, you know, milk. This is kind of like kiddie type stuff. But I'm not saying this is a kiddie type way. You kind of got to make this truth, you know, exciting to you. You kind of got to be in different books, different chapters, different verses, you know, things like, you know, the poetry, you know, Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon. You know, you got the Torah. Some would say the Pentateuch, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. You know, breaking down, you know, hey, you might want to read something different than what you read yesterday. You don't got to read the same things over and over. And you kind of want to get into scholarship too. I got the Black Holocaust, you know, different things like that. So there's many different things you can read that can kind of keep your spirit inflamed, you know, keep your spiritual understanding on another level. Like this, you know, I would read something like this, and it would bring me back. It would bring me back to the curses, you know, the Black Holocaust. So let me read something out of this real quick before we get back to the Jubilee contradictions. Now, I wanted to read, Salaki. I wanted to read this. Now, it says, let me get straight to it. Now, this is a book to kind of give you insight on what we used to deal with back in the slavery days. Now, this is the Arab slave trade. You know, this is page 31. So you can kind of get into this book too, get you some scholarship so you can be familiar with your history. You know, it says Europe, for all its ignorance, it says, was one of the last places on earth to be civilized. From 1630 AD on, Muhammad's army of Islam unified the peoples of the Arabian Peninsula, the Middle East, and much of Africa. Although the peoples of Arabia and the Middle East were sometimes unified by force, that was nothing compared to what befell the people of Africa. The Arab slave trade lasted from 625 AD, Arab-Nubian slave treaty, until 1890. It didn't truly end until 1911. Africans captured in wars, and we know it says Africa, but we know them to be Israelites. You know, Africans captured in wars by other Africans were sold into slavery for money or things, porcelain, silk, and other fine fabric from the Asia. And that goes back to Joel. You know, when I'm gonna just read it real quick. Joel. Now this is Joel chapter 3, and I'm gonna start at verse 3, and it reads, "And they have cast lots for my people, and have given a boy for an harlot, and sold a girl for wine, that they might drink. Yea, and what have ye to do with me, O Tyre and Zidon?" And them are Hamitic nations, you know, the tribes of Ham, you know, Mizraim, if you can understand, Canaanites, and all the coasts of Palestine. Even though they're dark races, you know, let me show you something. You know, even though they're dark races, now, when you go to the Compact Bible Dictionary, you know, mine's jammed up, you know, but when you go to the Compact Bible Dictionary, mine's is jammed up, but hey, we still making it happen. You know, you got to put a rubber band on some stuff. You got to put some tape on it, you know. Paul said, bring me those books, you know. Hey, Paul was a learned man. You know, if you're an Israelite, you got to be in and out of many different scholarships and different things. So I want to read this real quick. It says in the Compact Bible Dictionary, it says Ham. It says, if you can see this, you can. Hey, if you got a Bible dictionary, you can see this where it says Ham. This is what we're gonna be reading right here. Now, in the Compact Bible Dictionary, which is, I believe this is Zondervan, you know. So this is a good thing to get as well. You can look at this and you can read many different things out of this as well. And now it says Ham, the youngest son of Noah, born probably about 96 years before the flood, and one of the 8 persons to live through the flood. He became the progenitor of the dark races, not the Negroes, but the Egyptians, Ethiopians, Libyans, and Canaanites. And you can read about that in Genesis, the 10th chapter. His indigency, when his father lay drunken, brought a curse upon Canaan. So we're going to, let's sit on that. But that's just showing you that it was many different dark races on the earth. So everybody that says African, you know, we got to understand that it's a difference. So Joel chapter 3 verse 4, "Yea, and what have ye to do with me, O Tyre and Zidon, and all the coasts of Palestine? Will ye render me a recompense? And if ye recompense me swiftly and speedily, will I return your recompense upon your own head? Because ye have taken my silver and gold, and my gold, and have carried into your temples my goodly pleasant things." So the Lord likened the Israelites as his silver and his gold. All right. And it goes on to say in verse 6, it says, "The children also of Judah and the children of Jerusalem have you sold unto the Grecians." So that was a slave trade that we just read about in this book right here. You know, you can read about many different things outside of the Bible as far as your history, and I don't know, off the page. You know, so like we just read in the Joel chapter 3 verse 6, it says, the children also of Judah and the children of Jerusalem have ye sold unto the Grecians, that ye might remove them far from their border. Now, like we just read about the Arab slave trade, it says Arab Nubian slave treaty until 1890. It didn't truly end until 1911. Africans captured in wars by other Africans. So you had Hamites that sold Israelites, 2 different dark races, all right, were sold into slavery for money or things, porcelain, silk, and other fine fabric from the Asia that powerful and corrupt African nobility desires. Many of the enslaved Africans sold at the infamous Ujai market were brought from regions far to the west of Lake Tanganyika. All right. So these are things you can read about in this book right here. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I might have got this off Amazon. You know, this is also a good source to have and to know about your history. You know, the Black Holocaust for beginners. All right. So, brother, God, it says Adam and Eve 14:3 and 6. the book of Adam and Eve goes along with John 1 and 114. Nah, we're not reading no book of Adam and Eve, man. You gotta repent, you know. You may be a Canaanite, you know. I don't really know, but I'm just saying, you all over the place now. Now this is Jubilees, 30 and 7 again. It says, and if there is any man who wishes in Israel to give his daughter or his sister to any man who is of the seed of the other nations, he shall surely die, and they shall stone him with stones, for he has wrought shame in Israel, and they shall burn the woman with fire, because she has dishonored the name of the house of her father, and she shall be rooted out of Israel. Now, when you go to Deuteronomy chapter 7 and verse 1, it shows you that. We're going to read verses 1 through 3 in the King James. It says, when the Lord thy God shall bring thee into the land whither thou goest to possess it, and has cast out many nations before thee, the Hittites and the Girgashites and the Amorites and the Canaanites and the Perizzites and the Hivites and the Jebusites, 7 nations greater and mightier than thou. And when the Lord Yahweh thy Most High God shall deliver them before thee, thou shalt smite them and utterly destroy them. Thou shalt make no covenant with them, nor shew mercy unto them. Neither shalt thou make marriages with them. Thy daughter thou shalt not give unto his son, nor his daughter shalt thou take unto thy son. So that is against, you know, that's off, you know. So there's Jubilees. Hey, Jubilees, hey, you got to put that down, you know. And also, let me check, see anything else, you know. Let me check this comment board right here. Gotta stay on topic. So, yeah, man, you gotta come back to the truth. You're all over the place. And also, I want to get this real quick. Now, this is 1 Corinthians chapter 11. You know, the book of Enoch, the book of Jubilees, the book of Jasher, all that. Hey, look, you know, this stuff, it's not thus said the Lord. You know, a lot of it is something that will bug you out. 1 Corinthians chapter 11. And I want to start at verse 1. 1 Corinthians chapter 11 and verse 1. It says, be ye followers of me, even as I also am of Hamashiach, Christ. Now, Paul laid the foundation down. You know, he said, hey, be followers of me like I am of the Most High, Yahweh Bashim Yahushua. Paul didn't get bugged out by all of these other philosophies, you know. Now, what did Paul say? Now, let's go to Colossians, the classic. Colossians chapter 2. You know, stick to the basics, man. You know, you ain't got to get into all of those books, you know, getting all into what's the Talmud. You know, it's nothing wrong with knowing, you know, how to break down and cut up somebody that follows, you know, things that the Amalekites do, you know. But hey, that ain't something that you gotta surround and invest your life in. Neither should you surround and invest your life into the Quran, you know, because that's nothing but plagiarizing from the Bible, you know. So this is Colossians chapter 2, and I'm going to start at verse 7. It says, rooted, Colossians 2 and 7, rooted and built up in him. A lot of people, they're not rooted in the Lord. They're not built up in him. That's why they get tossed to and fro. They're all over the place. You know, they believe in reading this book, they're into this book, and they don't have a solid foundation, you know, rooted and built up in him, established in the faith. So a lot of people there aren't even established in the faith. A lot of things that they study and read and follow, they don't even really believe in it. They just want to follow it because somebody else showed them, or somebody else told them to do that, you know, or somebody else told them they gotta go to this building and spend 3 hours out of the day in this building and go to that building and teach what they had to sit down and learn in this building. That's how the Christian church is set up. You got many different people going from church to church to church, and they still wicked and demonic and indoctrinated with all type of philosophies and wicked heresies and wicked doctrines. You know, it says, Colossians 2 and 7, rooted and built up in him, established in the faith as ye have been taught, abounding therein with thanksgiving. Beware, lest any man spoil you. So a lot of people, they're spoiled. You know, they've been overthrown by many different things. You know, it says, beware, lest any man spoil you through philosophy and vain deceit, after the tradition of men, after the rudiments of the world, and not after Christ. So a lot of people, they're after the rudiments of the world and not after the things of Hamashiach Yahweh Shah, you know. So let's move on. So stand on course what we was already going into. Now, going back to this, I believe I wanted Isaiah 28. Isaiah 28, and I'm gonna start at verse 22, and it reads. It says, because you got scoffers and haters and mockers on the comment board that want to overthrow people, that want to overthrow people from the truth, and they want to show people, you know, how much deception they're into and how much they've been deceived. Now, this is Isaiah 22, so like Isaiah 28 and verse 22, and it reads, it says, now therefore be ye not mockers, lest your bands be made strong. For I have heard from the Lord God of hosts a consumption, even determined upon the whole earth. So the Lord said, don't be mockers. You know, don't mock the messengers. You know, don't mock the prophets. You know, because, hey, there's a judgment that's going to be sent. Now, I want to get this in Jeremiah. I believe it's Jeremiah chapter 20 that I want. This is Jeremiah. And I want to start at... let me see. Jeremiah chapter 20, and I'm going to start at verse 4, and it reads. And in fact, I'm going to start at verse 3. Jeremiah 20 and 3, it says, and it came to pass on the morrow that Phasar brought forth Jeremiah out of the stocks. Then said Jeremiah unto him, the Lord had not called thy name Phasar, unto Megar Mesabib, for thus said the Lord, behold, I will make thee a terror to thyself and to all thy friends, and they shall fall by the sword of their enemies, and thine eyes shall behold it, and I will give all Judah into the hand of the king of Babylon, and he shall carry them captive into Babylon, and shall slay them with the sword. Moreover, I will deliver all the strength of the city, and all the labors thereof, and all the precious things thereof, and all the treasures of the kings of Judah will I give into the hand of their enemies. We shall spoil them, and take them, and carry them to Babylon. And thou, Phasar, and all that dwell in thy house shall go into captivity, and thou shalt come to Babylon, and there thou shalt die, and shalt be buried there, thou and all thy friends to whom thou hast prophesied lies. O Lord, thou hast deceived me. So the Lord told Jeremiah to prophesy, and he set Jeremiah up to be a prophet. But you had people that was mocking Jeremiah. You had people that was trying to jam Jeremiah up, you know. And so Jeremiah was about to say, hey, this is something heavy, man. I got to go through this. You know, I got to get jammed up. I got to get mocked. I got to get ridiculed. I got to get spit upon. And it's the same thing that happened to the Messiah, you know. It says, I'm going to go down to verse 10. Jeremiah 20:10. It says, for I heard the defaming of many, fear on every side, report say they, and we will report it. All my familiars watch for my halting, saying, peradventure he will be enticed, and we shall prevail against him, and we shall take our revenge on him. So, hey, you had people trying to jam him up. You had people that, and this is coming back on the earth, you know. It's going to be, like it says in Matthew chapter 24, you will be hated of all nations for my name's sake, you know. In the same way that Jeremiah was hated, same way the men of the Lord were hated, you know, the apostles. This is coming back on the earth, you know. So you had people that was trying to snitch for, you know, lack of another word, snitch on Jeremiah for teaching the Bible, you know, and was trying to jam him up, that the high ruler that told him not to speak and prophesy again, they was going to tell if he was to do that, you know. So hey, you got mockers and you got scoffers and you got people that think they're holy and righteous going against the grain, you know. So no more comments. So we're gonna move on. So like the title says, it says, do you love the truth? Now I want to get St. John chapter 14. You know, this is St. John chapter 14. And I want to start at verse 15. Because a lot of people, they don't love the truth. You know, and neither do they understand the truth. You know, they don't want the truth to set them free. You know, Ashura reincarnated said, can you go into Jacob's trouble when you get a chance? Khan. So let me finish this and then we're going to get into Jacob's trouble. Now, St. John chapter 14 and verse 12, it said, so like I want verse 15. So a lot of people, they don't love the truth. You know, they don't like to have examination being put on the table. Because when you come before the Most High, you have to come a certain way. You have to move a certain way. You have to attest to your wrongs and you have to confess your faults. That's why the Lord said in James chapter 5, you know, a lot of people don't want to admit that they're into religion. You know, they're into a form of practice. You know, they're into the paganism. A lot of people don't want to admit that. A lot of people, they ever tell you, they would say, well, we know Christmas isn't about Christ, but that's just the best time of the year. You know, they don't really love the truth, you know, and neither do they love the Lord, you know. So this is James chapter 5, and we're going to start at verse 15. James chapter 5 verse 15, and it says, and the prayer of faith shall save the sick, and the Lord shall raise him up. And if he have committed sins, they shall be forgiven him. So the Lord wants to raise up those that love the truth, you know, but you have to ask yourself, do you love the truth? You know, verse 16, James chapter 5 verse 16, it says, confess your faults one to another and pray one for another. So the Lord wants us to confess our wrongs. You know, but you got a lot of people, all they want to do, time and time again, you know, is allow pride to overthrow them. You know, they like to be prideful. They like to act like they don't got no faults. They like to act like they don't fall short. If you see or if you know a man or a woman or a child, like it, if you know somebody that try to makes it seem like they don't fall short, that's off. You got to get far away from them as possible. That's not holy. That's not righteous. You know, because if you see somebody doing wrong according to Leviticus 5:1, you got to speak upon that. You got to allow that to be brought to light. You know, because the Lord is all about reproving and correcting. You know, that's all throughout the Bible. The Lord said his scriptures are given for reproof, for correction, for instructions. You know, so it said James chapter 5 and verse 16, it says, confess your faults one to another and pray one for another that ye may be healed. The effectual fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much. So we should want to be healed in these last days. So that's why it's important to understand the truth and to know how the truth is set up. Now I want to get this in St. John chapter 14 and verse 15. It says, if ye love me, keep my commandments. So if you love the truth, you're going to keep the Lord's commandments. Now, I also want to get St. John chapter 4. And let's start at verse 24. Mighty precept. St. John chapter 4 and verse 24. And it reads, it says, Most High God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. So if you love the truth, you're going to worship the Most High and in spirit and in truth. You're going to read, you're going to fast, you're going to pray, you're going to do all these things to make yourself a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable unto the Most High God. Like it says in the classic. Let me get this real quick. Now this is Romans chapter 12 and verse 1. If you love the truth, you will do this. Romans chapter 12 and verse 1. It says, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of Most High God, that ye present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto Most High God, which is your reasonable service. So you're going to present your body a living sacrifice. You're not going to look at everything. You're going to make sure you make a covenant with your eyes. You're not going to watch pornography. You're not going to look on naked videos and naked pictures and things like that. You're not going to be jammed up with doctrines. You're going to make your body a living sacrifice. You're going to give your mind over to righteous things. You're going to give your body over to righteous things. And you're going to do these things even if you love the truth. Now, it goes on to say, verse 2, Romans 12:2, and be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed. So you can't even be conformed to this world. You got many people, they're worshiping different idols. You're not going to do that. They're celebrating wicked pagan days. You're not going to do that. If you love the truth, and be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that ye may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of Most High God. You see that? If you love the truth. Now, I'm going to get this in the Apocrypha. This is Sirach chapter 17. Not going to be too long. Got a couple more precepts to go into before we get into Jacob's trouble. Now, Sirach chapter 17 and verse 11, and it reads, it says, in the Apocrypha, Ecclesiasticus chapter 17 and verse 11, it says, by this, it's like it, beside this, he gave them knowledge and the law of life for an inheritance. So the Lord, he gave us instructions on how we can get closer to him, on how we can love him, on how we can respect him and honor him. These are the instructions that the Lord gave. He gave us commandments. He gave us things to show how we can love our wives, our children, our daughters, and set up and establish our sons to be leaders behind us, respect and honor our elders and our brothers, and, knowing how to maneuver in our congregation. So Ecclesiasticus chapter 17 and verse 12 in the Apocrypha, it says, he made an everlasting covenant with them and shewed them his judgments. Their eyes saw the majesty of his glory, and their ears heard his glorious voice. You see that? So this is what is acceptable to those that love the truth. Now I'm going to get this in 1 Corinthians. Our forefathers, they showed how much they love the truth, And what we mean by the truth, we also mean by, congregating with one another, keeping feast days, keeping high holy days, things like that. Wearing our fringes, keeping the commandments, not eating pork, not eating shrimp, crab, and lobster, correcting our wives, our spouses, correcting our children, loving our brothers and our sisters, loving our wives, getting our houses in order. These are things that we're talking about as we're saying, do we love the truth? Because if you don't love the truth, you're not going to correct your wife if you have one. If you don't love the truth, if you are a wife, you're not going to cook for your husband. You're not going to clean. You're not going to cook for your children. You're not going to order your house right. You're not going to order your hands right. If you don't love the truth, you're going to be smoking weed. You're going to be hanging around worldly people. If you don't love the truth, and these are things that we have to talk about, because a lot of people, they make it seem like they love the truth, but they really don't love the truth. They hate reading their Bible. They hate the thought of fasting. They hate the thought of putting their body in subjection. And these are many things that we have to talk about, because this is what's going on in these last days. If you don't love the truth, you're going to hate camps. You're going to talk about camps. You're going to talk about different congregations. You're going to make videos about them. You hate order. You hate following anybody, and you love wickedness. So this is 1 Corinthians chapter 16, and I'm going to start at verse 15, and it reads, it said, I'm going to start at verse 14, 1 Corinthians 16 and 14. It says, let all your things be done with charity. And charity goes a long way. Because what I'm doing right now is pertaining unto charity, giving time and love and knowledge and wisdom and understanding to people that I may never meet in the flesh, and that I may never have seen a day of my life. You know, charity goes a long way. You know, so charity can be a big act. You know, and it also goes into, you know, not just only giving money, but on a more scale. Let me get this. Let's get the blue letter right quick, the etymology, so we can get a deeper understanding. So charity goes a long way. So a lot of people, they don't do it though. You know, they selfish. You got a lot of people that's selfish in these last days. So charity, I don't know if let me see. The volume is up.
Strong's G26. Agape. Agape.
So agape, it says affection, goodwill, love, benevolence, brotherly love. You know, so you gotta show love. You know, and that's also keeping the commandments. You know, showing love goes a long way. You know, you could cuss somebody out. You know, the Lord said, be angry, but don't sin. You know, so somebody may cuss you out. Hey, you might get mad about that, but you're not gonna sin. You're not gonna hate your brother or your sister. You know, so love goes a long way. You know, and just the same way you can give somebody money, you can show somebody love. So there's many different avenues of charity that people may understand and people may not understand. But charity goes a long way. So, but hey, if you don't love the truth, hey, you're not gonna show love. You know, you're not gonna salute people. You're not gonna, you know, respect nobody. You're just gonna be a demon. You know, you're gonna show hatred if you don't love the truth. Now, this is 1 Corinthians chapter 16 and verse 15. It says, I beseech you, brethren, ye know the house of Stephanus, that it is the first fruits of Achaia, and that they have addicted themselves to the ministry of the saints. So you gotta ask yourself, if you love the truth, you're gonna be addicted, you know, because anything that somebody loves, they're gonna want a lot of it. They're gonna continue to be into it. You know, you got crackheads. They love that crack pipe so much that they would do anything to keep that crack pipe, you know, being lit. You know, they'll sell their house, they'll sell their cars. You know, they'll do anything to keep that crack pipe in their pocket and continue to get, which is wicked, which is demonic, which is idolatry, which is abomination. You know, but you got to ask yourself, do you love the truth? And are you addicted to it? You know, you got to constantly be in and out, reading the Bible. You know, constantly in tune with the Most High. Because like the Most High said, roughly paraphrasing, where he is, that's where his servant should be. You know, whether you're a man, a woman, or a child. Now, I also wanted to get 1 Corinthians 1 and 16. You know, because Stephanus, he wasn't just some man that never popped up, or some man nobody never known about. You know, hey, he was around the men of God of Yahweh by Shem Yahushua. Now this is 1 Corinthians, and he was, like it said in 1 Corinthians 16 and 15, he was addicted to the truth. He showed us that he really loved the truth. You know, 1 Corinthians chapter 1 and verse 16, and it reads, it says, and I baptized also the household of Stephanus. Besides, I know not whether I baptized any other. So Paul, in order to be baptized by Paul, meaning to be taught by Paul, you know, that's a big deal. That's not nothing light. You know, that's a big deal. You know, a lot of people, you know, they don't know who they following. And after they've been taught by somebody, they don't even remain in those teachings. You know, he was taught, Stephanus was taught, and his household was taught by Paul, you know, baptized under his teachings and what the Lord taught him. So he remained in there. You know, so let me get this in Song of Solomon. You know, do you really love the truth? You got to ask yourself that. Do you love the Sabbath? You know, do you love, as a woman, if you're a woman, do you love being modest? Or do you hate the truth? Do you like to reveal yourself? You know, do you like to reveal other people's business? You know, do you like to destroy people's lives? If you don't love the truth, these are questions and these are things you're subject to. Now, this is Song of Solomon, chapter 3, and I'm gonna start at verse 2, and it reads. It says, I will rise now and go about the city in the streets, and in the broad ways I will seek him whom my soul loveth. And so that's a parabolic thing is known as the words of the Lord. You know, because like it says in Ecclesiasticus in the Apocrypha. Let me get this in Wisdom of Solomon. The word of the Lord, you know, it runs swiftly and it's all throughout the earth. Now, this is Wisdom of Solomon in the Apocrypha, chapter 8 and verse 1. It says, wisdom reacheth from one end to another mightily, and swiftly do it she order all things. I loved her and sought her out from my youth. So you're not going to wait until you're on your deathbed to really get closer to the Lord, to get deeper into his word. You're not going to wait till you catch an STD after you done been fornicating and freaking off your whole life to kind of want to get closer to the Lord. You're not going to wait till after you done sold drugs and you done went and then sold something to a private, not a private investigator, but an undercover cop. And then now you got caught and now you want to come back to the Lord. You know, if you love the truth, you're going to come to the Lord quickly, swiftly, speedily, early. You know, you're not going to wait till you get jammed up. You're not going to wait till you have your bladder removed. You're not going to wait till you have a heart attack. You're not going to wait till you catch an STD. You're not going to wait till somebody catch you sleeping with their wife or another woman sleeping with somebody else's husband. You're not going to wait till your mama die, your daddy die. You're not going to wait till you got death in your family. You're going to come back to the Lord right now. You know, it says, I loved her and sought her out for my youth. I desired to make her my spouse, and I was a lover of her beauty. And this is how we feel on a spiritual level. And that's why the Lord said in Revelation, you know, according to the 144,000 men that's going to be governed the earth in the days to come, that's why they're going to be on a higher level, because they put the Most High first. They love him, you know. Even if you have a spouse, you put the Most High first. Even if you have a job, you put the Most High first. Even if you have children, you put the Most High first. Even if you're afflicted in your body, you put the Most High first. Even if you ain't got no money, you put the Most High first. Even if you're jammed up and can't really talk right, you put the Most High first. Even if you got a stuttering problem, you're trying to teach the words of God. You're trying to give somebody the message, exhort somebody. You know, let's go to Deuteronomy. I don't talk the best, but they don't stop me from teaching. They don't stop me from going. A lot of people got excuses. You know, stop making excuses and show forth how much you really love God, how much you love this truth. You know, because you got to let your yay be your yay and your nay be your nay. You can't bring forth excuses when the judgment is on the earth, when the Lord is allowing your receipts and all of the things that you've done to be played out on the earth. You know, either you love him or you don't. You know, either you want to be wicked or you want to strive to be better and righteous. Song of Solomon, chapter 3 and verse 3, it says, the watchmen that go about the city found me, to whom I said, saw ye him whom my soul loveth. So, hey, the Lord, he going to allow somebody to get on you. Whether it's a teacher on the streets, whether they're in a congregation, whether they're from this congregation, from that congregation, whether you follow this YouTube channel from this camp, or whether you follow that YouTube channel from that church, or whatever you want to subscribe to, the Lord is going to allow you to hear his message and going to allow you to be subject unto his words and to come back to him. That's why it says in Psalms 1, I believe this is Psalms 141, you know, the righteous have smitten me. Now, this is Psalms 141, because even though it's flesh and blood that's getting on you, telling you to repent, come back to the Lord, hey, that's you being smitten. Now, this is Psalms. Let me get this real quick. Psalms 141, and I'm going to start at verse 5. It says, let the righteous smite me, it shall be a kindness, and let him reprove me, it shall be an excellent oil, which shall not break my head, for yet my prayer also shall be in the calamities. So when another man or a woman is getting on you And using the Bible, that's the righteous smiting you. The righteous words of the Most High is smiting you, trying to correct you, get you in order, you know. So I want to get Ezekiel chapter 18 real quick. It's the book of Ezekiel chapter 18. You know, you got to ask yourself, do you love the truth? You know, Ezekiel chapter 18 and verse 4. And are you moving in the spirit to bring forth those actions to show that you love the truth? It says, Ezekiel chapter 18 and 4, it says, behold, all souls are mine, as the soul of the Father, so also the soul of the Son is mine. The soul that sinneth, it shall die. But if a man be just and do that which is lawful and right, and hath not eaten upon the mountains, neither had lifted up his eyes to the idols of the house of Israel, neither had defiled his neighbor's wife, neither hath come near to a mistress woman, and had not oppressed any, but had restored to the debtor his pledge, had spoiled none by violence, had given his bread to the hungry, and had covered the naked with a garment. So those are actions that's going to show forth if you really love the truth, you know. If you've came close to a menstruous woman, hey, you have went through the law and the acts according to Leviticus, and abstain yourself from the congregation after the days of purification. Even like it says in restore the debt to his pledge, because in the days of old, you might have had a poor man that had to borrow something according to a pledge, and if it's something that he holds in high regards as his raiment, something to keep him warm, because we always been a nation of poor people, you know. So you couldn't just hold on to that pledge and jam that brother up. Now he's sleeping, or that sister up. Now they're sleeping and they don't have anything to cover them, you know. And it says had given his bread to the hungry, you know, because like it says in Matthew chapter 25, if you haven't done it to the least, you haven't done it to me. You know, so these things we have to give an account of, and it's going to show forth whether we love the truth or not. You know, now I also wanted Numbers chapter 16. You know, still stand on topic. And we also have to touch on Jacob's trouble. Now this is Numbers chapter 16 and verse 22, and it reads, it says, and I'm gonna start at verse 20, Numbers chapter 16 and verse 20. It says, and the Lord spake unto Moses and unto Aaron, saying, separate yourselves from among this congregation, that I may consume them in a moment. So the Lord is about to bring judgment unto the rebels, you know, Korah, Dathan, and Abiram being rebellious in this account right here. Verse 21, Numbers 16 and 21. Separate yourselves from among this congregation, that I may consume them in a moment. Now, what if the Lord wanted to do that in this day and age? What if you're around somebody that's being rebellious? What if you're hanging with somebody that's being rebellious? You know, somebody that's mocking the Most High, somebody that's in the eyes of the Most High, blaspheming the Most High. You know, being an adversary to the Most High, being an enemy to the Most High. You know, verse 22, and they fell upon their faces and said, O God, the God of the spirits of all flesh, shall one man sin, and wilt thou be wroth with all the congregation? So, the Lord, you know, he can separate a single individual from the congregation, so the whole congregation won't get jammed up. You know, that's why it's important, not only on a spiritual level, that's why it's important. If you're unclean, like for instance, if you're in a congregation, you have to abide by certain laws according to the laws of the Most High God. That way you won't jam somebody else up. That's why even if you touch a dead body, you have to be isolated. You can't come around, you know, other people. And if you're a woman on her menstrual cycle, you have to be isolated. You can't come around other people. So even on a spiritual level, you know, not just only in a physical sense to where you touch the dead body or you're physically unclean, even on the spiritual level, the Lord, he can allow that same thing to be implemented according to the Spirit, you know. Now, let's go to St. John 18, you know, because like we asked, do you really love the truth? You know, and Pilate asked Yahweh, what is the truth? You know, so this is St. John 18 and verse 37, and it reads, I'm gonna start at verse 36. Yahweh shall answer, my kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then will my servants fight, that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now is my kingdom not from thence. Pilate therefore said unto him, art thou a king then? Yahweh shall answer, thou sayest that I am a king. So the Lord, hey, he was very wise. You know, he didn't have to say a lot. You know, and a little bit that he said a lot. You know, he's speaking parables. He confounds. You know, he's the ultimate teacher. So this is what he said to Pilate, and this is what you have to ask yourself. You know, because a lot of people, they don't really love the truth. And even as an Israelite, they show that they don't love the truth. And so every day of their lives, every day the Most High give them grace and mercy. Even myself, you know, you gotta move in a sense that you know the truth, you know. And if you're doing wickedness, if you speaking folly and madness, you know, you're gonna be asking the same question as this Edomite. What is the truth? Anytime you commit adultery, you asking the Lord, what is the truth? Anytime you stealing, you know, committing wicked acts, you asking the Lord, what is the truth? And you kind of shunning him away, and you trying to crucify him. You know, even though we all fall short, you know, that's why it's important, like it says in Luke 5:32. You know, he didn't call the righteous, but he called sinners to repentance. You know, St. John 18:37. Pilate therefore said unto him, art thou a king then? Yahweh shall answer, thou sayest that I am a king. To this end was I born, and for this cause came I into the world, that I should bear witness unto the truth. Everyone that is of the truth hear my voice. So if you are in love with the truth, you're going to hear the Lord's voice. And if you are of the truth, you're going to hear the Lord's voice. You know, that's why the Lord said, my sheep hear my voice. You know, and anybody that came not up through the door, you know, they wasn't really of the truth. You know, they're not, you know, the sheep of the Most High. As it states in St. John chapter 10. You know, now St. John 18:38, it says, Pilate said unto him, what is truth? And when he had said this, he went out again unto the Jews and said unto them, I find in him no fault at all. So he asked him, what is the truth? You know, and every time we go off, every time we fall short, that's the same spirit that we moving in. You know, surely we shouldn't be moving in the spirit of a wicked heathen, an Edomite, a Roman ruler named Pilate. You know, we got to be moving in the spirit of truth. Now, let me get this in St. John 8:31. St. John chapter 8 and verse 31, and it reads, it says, then said Yahushua to those Jews which believed on him, if ye continue in my word, then are ye my disciples indeed. And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. And so we still holding on to that. You know, we're not free in the sense of we're not paying taxes, you know, and we're not free in the sense that we don't have to wrestle with our flesh. You know, we're not free in the sense that we're not ever going to fall short again. That's why we need our shepherd, like it says in Psalm chapter 23. You know, the Lord is my shepherd. You know, I shall not want. Even though I want to be free from this corruptible body, I'm waiting on my Lord and Savior. That's what you should be doing. Waiting on your Lord and Savior. You know, waiting on your Redeemer to redeem you from this hellhole and from this flesh that's corrupt. You know, wicked thoughts, all of these things that you have to wrestle and deal with every day. But just because you have to fight your flesh and your spirit had to be against your flesh, that doesn't mean you don't love the truth. That means you got to hold on to the righteous. You got to hold on to the words of life. You got to hold on to the Lord. You got to be rooted and built up in him. You got to have your foundation on solid rock and not on sand. You know. So like it says again, St. John 8:32, and ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Now, this is what the Lord said, verse 33. Because these men asked, they said, hey, we not servants, we not bondmen. Verse 33, they answered him, we be Abraham's seed, and were never in bondage to any man. How sayest thou, ye shall be made free? Yahweh shall answer them, verily, verily, I say to you, whosoever committed sin is the servant of sin. So we still are captive. That's why Paul said that what I want to do, I don't do, but that what I don't want to do, I do that. Because I found in my members, I'm warring against my flesh. My spirit is warring against my flesh. You know? Now it says, verse 35, and the servant abided not in the house forever, but the son abided ever. If the Son therefore shall make you free, ye shall be free indeed. So that's what we waiting on. We waiting on to be redeemed by the Most High. Yahweh Shem Shah. So this is Philippians. Let me get this real quick. Philippians chapter 3 and verse 3. And it reads, it says, for we are the circumcision. So hey, this is on a spiritual sense of knowing that, you know, we've now been trimmed and had that old man trimmed off and had the newness come into place, you know. So it says, Philippians chapter 3 verse 3, for we are the circumcision which worship Most High God in the spirit and rejoice in Hamashiach Yahweh Shah and have no confidence in the flesh. So we don't have any confidence in the flesh. You know, we worship the Most High God in spirit and in truth. You know, so we're going to be subject unto renewing our minds and renewing our spirit. Because it's not only the law, statutes, and commandments that's going to save us. It's also our hope in the Lord that's going to save us. So like it says in Philippians 3 and 3 one more time, for we are the circumcision which worship Most High God in the spirit and rejoice in Hamashiach Yahweh Shah and have no confidence in the flesh. So all praise to Yahweh Shem Shah. So we're going to soon wind down. So like a shore reincarnated said, can you go into Jacob's trouble? So let's go to real quick. I want to get Amos. Let's go into Jacob's trouble. And I don't think, if I'm not mistaken, I don't think I did a lesson on Jacob's trouble. But I may have, but it's all right. Lord willing, we'll do another one. So let's go to Amos real quick. This is the book of Amos through the spirit and the power of Yahweh Shem Shah, so we can answer the question. So this is Amos chapter 3, and I want to start at verse 6, and it reads, it says, shall a trumpet be blown in the city, and the people not be afraid? Shall there be evil in a city, and the Lord had not done it? Surely the Lord God Most High would do nothing, but he revealeth his secret unto his servants, the prophets. So anything the Lord is going to do, he's going to allow it to be echoed by the prophets, you know, because they were given the secrets of the Most High. They were given the visions on how the Lord is going to raise up a kingdom and bring down a kingdom, you know, and many things were echoed from Daniel the prophet on how the Babylonians will be brought down, how the Syrians will be brought down, the Persians and the Medes will be brought down, the Romans will be brought down. So many things were prophesied by the prophets. And so Jacob's trouble is also prophesied by the prophets, you know. So let me get this in Acts chapter 14. And so when you think about Jacob's trouble, you think about troubles are being brought to the earth to the 12 tribes of Israel. That's why it says Jacob's trouble, you know, because the seed line of Jacob is going to have trouble. And one reason why Jacob is going to have trouble is because Esau knows his time is going to be cut off. So he's going to try to wreak havoc, and all hell is going to break loose. And he's going to pull all the stops out, and he's going to try to afflict the Israelites more and more. And so let's go to Acts chapter 14 and verse 22. Now, and this is one thing you got to understand. You know, the Lord doesn't afflict Israelites for no reason. Now, one thing that happened to the Messiah, Christ himself, is the same thing that's going to happen to Israelites, especially those that believe on the Messiah. and those that cleave unto the Messiah. Now, this is Acts chapter 14, and I'm going to start at verse 22. And it reads, it says, confirming the souls of the disciples and exhorting them to continue in the faith, and that we must, through much tribulation, enter into the kingdom of Most High God. So through much tribulation, you're going to enter into the kingdom of the Lord. You're going to be afflicted. You're going to be cast down. You're going to be put in concentration camps. You're going to be put in FEMA camps. You're going to be hated by all nations. Some may be martyrs. Some may get their head chopped off, like John the Baptist. Some may be crucified, like the apostles and the Messiah himself. And so, hey, look, the Messiah, he represents Jacob too. Yahushua himself, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, he come from the seed line of Jacob. Let's go to Matthew chapter 1 real quick. So it doesn't just only stop with the 12 tribes of Israel. Because if you come from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, you come from the lineage of King David as well. You come from the lineage of Yahushua HaMashiach, the Messiah himself. So this is Matthew chapter 1, verse 1, and it reads, that's why it's called Jacob's trouble. Matthew chapter 1, verse 1, the book of the generation of Yahushua HaMashiach, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham begot Isaac, and Isaac begot Jacob, and Jacob begot Judas and his brethren. And so when you read this and you go all the way down, these are, it says 14 generations, So Matthew 1 and 3, and Judas begot Phares and Zara of Dalmor, and Phares begot Ezram, and Ezram begot Aram, and Aram begot Aminadab, and Aminadab begot Nasan, and Nasan begot Salmon, and Salmon begot Boaz of Rechab. And Boaz begot Obed of Ruth, and Obed begot Jesse, and Jesse begot David the king. And David the king begot Solomon of her that had been the wife of Uriah. So we're not going to read this whole thing, but this is just showing you that when you accept the Lord, hey, it's not only the lineage, but we're going to go through the same thing the Lord went through. King David had trouble, Hey, so, I'm not going to say Solomon had trouble, because he didn't actually have a war, he didn't have to go to war like David did. But guess what? He had to deal with things in his spirit. The Lord cut him down and took parts of the kingdom from him, the northern kingdom from him. So on a spiritual level, yes, the Israelites, the seed line of Jacob, they're going to have trouble. Now, on another level, let's go to Jeremiah. Now, on another sense, Israelites are going to have trouble in a time as far as being pilgrims on the earth. You may have to be on the run. You may have to flee. You may have to look for succor. You may have to flee from people trying to kill you. That's literally going to come to the earth. Now, let's go to Jeremiah chapter 28, and I'm going to start at verse 7 real quick. And it reads, it says, nevertheless, hear thou now this word that I speak in thine ears and in the ears of all the people. The prophets that have been before me and before thee of old prophesied both against many countries and against great kingdoms, of war and of evil and of pestilence. So even in the days of old, you had many evils being done from these different nations. These different nations have done many evil things. When you go back to the history, look what the Greeks done to the Israelites. Look what the Greeks have done during the Maccabees, during the time of the Maccabees. You had women that was keeping the law, statutes, and commandments, and they actually hung their children. Let me get that real quick. That's also something that was troubling for Jacob. And it's going to be even more on a more vast scale. More wickedly done than the days of old. Now, this is in the Apocrypha, 2 Maccabees chapter 6. And I want to start at verse 9, get straight to the point. 2 Maccabees chapter 6 and verse 9, and it reads, it says, and whoso would not conform themselves to the manners of the Gentiles. And that's coming back on the earth. Don't just read Maccabees and think these 400 years of history after the prophets, after when you read Malachi, don't think it just stops there and then straight to the Gospels. This is 400 years of history that wickedness was done by the Greeks. That's gonna be still being operated still into this day. You know, so 2 Maccabees 6:9, and whoso would not conform themselves to the manners of the Gentiles should be put to death. Then might a man have seen the present misery, for there were 2 women brought who had circumcised their children, because they kept the law of Moses, whom when they had openly led round about the city, the babes hanging at their breasts, they cast them down headlong from the wall, and others that had run together into caves. So not only in those days during the Grecians in rulership, you had people running away, going into caves. You also gonna have this being done on another level in this day and age that we are living in. You're gonna be running. You're gonna be trying to go into caves. You're gonna be running and fleeing in the mountains, in the woods. And that's what you know to be as Jacob's trouble. You know, you're gonna know it's Jacob's trouble when you have to really run and be on the fleet and be on the go. You know, just like our forefathers and foremothers and our ancestors were in the days of the Grecians and the Greeks. You know, 2 Maccabees chapter 6:10, for there were 2 women brought who had circumcised their children, whom when they had openly led round about the city, the babes hanging at their breasts, they cast them down headlong from the wall, and others that had run together into caves nearby to keep the Sabbath day secretly. So that's, hey, look, and you got another verse. Let me get this real quick, because it says secretly. That's why when you go to this verse right here, let me get this real quick if I can remember where this precept was. Now, this is Matthew chapter 24 and verse 20. It says secretly. So our forefathers and foremothers were secretly having to keep the Sabbath day. That's why the Lord said this. This is Matthew chapter 24. And I'm going to start at verse 20. It says, but pray ye that your flight be not in the winter, neither on the Sabbath day. Because the Lord knew there was going to be tribulation on the earth. He knew there was going to be times where it's going to be very grievous to Jacob, the seed line of Jacob. He knew that we was going to have trouble. He knew tribulations was going to be on the earth, not just only in 70 AD, but also soon to come, before the second coming of Yahushua HaMashiach. So going back to the Apocrypha, 2 Maccabees, you know, and still to this day, you got to pray that your flight don't be in the wintertime. Meaning, hey, you might have to be on the move. You know, you might have to run, be on the go. You know, somebody might be trying to kill you. You know, somebody might be trying to really take your life because of your faith in the Lord. And you condemning the wicked. You speaking against this society. You know, it says 2 Maccabees 6 and verse 11, and others that had run together into caves nearby to keep the Sabbath day secretly, being discovered to Philip, were all burnt together. So, hey, you may even get burnt in this day. You know, you had the prophets getting boiled alive, getting sawed in half. Hey, look up some of the stuff that happened to the apostles. You know, just Google it. You know, you can see things that went on, the history that went on. John had his head cut off. Peter was crucified upside down. You know, many things were happening, done to the men of the Lord. You know, because they had made a conscience to help themselves for the honor of the most sacred day. So these are things that are actually going to happen that you can read about, you know. So going back to this. So going back to Jeremiah chapter 28 and verse 8, and it says, the prophets that have been before me and before thee of old prophesied both against many countries and against great kingdoms of war and of evil and of pestilence. So many of the prophets, they prophesied about these things that are coming to the earth. So let's go to Jeremiah chapter 30. And we're going to read about Jacob's trouble. Jeremiah chapter 30, and I want to start at verse 7. Jeremiah chapter 30 and verse 7, it says, Alas, for that day is great, so that none is like it. So, brother Ashur reincarnated, Jacob's trouble hasn't came yet. And the day that it comes, it's going to be a day that was never like this day. The slave trade, like we just read earlier in this lesson. You know, the Arab slave trade isn't bad compared to Jacob's trouble. It says, like it says in Jeremiah 30:7, it says, Alas, for that day is great, so that none is like it. So this day, this day of Jacob's trouble that hasn't came yet, all the stuff that we've been through as a nation of people on the face of the earth, is nowhere near compared to what we're going to go through in Jacob's trouble. This could be the ultimate test for Israelites, before the kingdom is on the earth, before the kingdom is established. This devil that controls this society and ruling in this society is going to pull all stops out. Read 2nd Ezra chapter 16. They're going to be ravishing people's houses, running in people's houses, destroying people's houses, looking for the Israelites. We're the ones that literally have everything against us. Everything that goes on in this society is really because of the Israelites. The school system is set up the way it is so the Israelites can be overthrown. The pharmaceutical industry is set up the way it is so they can overthrow the Israelites, because we're strong, we're intelligent, we're mighty. The water, the packaging of water is set up the way it is to overthrow Israelites. They saying let's figure out how we can put fluoride in them. Let's overthrow their thinking because they're reading their Bibles. They're teaching their Bibles. They're prophesying. They're going precept upon precept. Let's try to slow down their thinking. Let's try to throw them off. The food system is set up the way it is. Restaurants, GMO foods, genetically modified things is put in our food to overthrow us. The internet is set up to try to distract us, to keep us away from the Bible. Just imagine how many people will be on this live right now if the NBA wasn't a thing, if the NFL wasn't a thing, if reality shows, TV shows wasn't a thing. Just imagine how many people will be on the highways and byways just waiting for the precepts to come out if they didn't have distractions, if you didn't have music videos, if you didn't have, all of these things that are set up by the elites to distract us. Just imagine how many people would come to camp or even tune in if the liquor store wasn't a big thing. Not saying you can't drink, but just keeping it real. So this day of Jacob's trouble, it's way worse than the slave trade. It's way worse than Planned Parenthood. It's way worse than being put in prison. Jeremiah chapter 30 verse 7, Alas, for that day is great, so that none is like it. It is even the time of Jacob's trouble. But he, it says, but he, and this he is talking about the elect. Only the elect will be saved out of it. It says, but he shall be saved out of it. And what I mean by the elect, let's go to Matthew chapter 16. Matthew chapter 16, because you can't overthrow the elect, Matthew chapter 16, and I want to start at verse 17. Matthew 16 and 17, and it reads, and it says, and Yahweh shall answer and said it to him. So like getting kind of dark. Matthew chapter 16 and verse 17, and Yahweh shall answer and said it to him, Blessed art thou, Simon Bar Jonah, for flesh and blood had not revealed it unto thee, but my Father which is in heaven. So the Lord is speaking to Peter, but on a more spiritual level, Peter represents the elect, And it says, verse 18, and I say also unto thee that thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. So the Lord is saying upon the rock, because Peter represents the church, right? And not only that, but like Peter said in 1 Peter, let's go to 1 Peter real quick. 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse 9, it says, but ye are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, and holy nation, a peculiar people, that ye should shew forth the praises of him that had called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Was Peter himself the only one called out of darkness into this marvelous light? No. There's many other Israelites that came to the truth, that know they're Israel, so-called Black, Hispanics, and Native Americans. So Peter represents the elect, you know, represents the 1/3. And within that 1/3, a more higher election, the 144,000, you know. So it says, and what I mean by 144,000, 144,000 men. And within that 1/3, you have men and women. So it says in Matthew chapter 16 and verse 18, and I say unto thee, thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. So the gates of hell, as we understand hell to be sufferings, trials, and tribulations, you know, many things that try to overthrow the truth, you know, like King David said in Psalms 18 and 4, the gate, hell have compassed me. You know, let me read it real quick in Psalms 18 and 4. This is the book of Psalms, chapter 18 and 4. And it reads, it says, the sorrows of death compassed me, and the floods of ungodly men made me afraid. The sorrows of hell compassed me about. The snares of death prevented me. So hell is a condition, you know. So we're going to have to continue to go through hell and Jacob's trouble. And so also I want to get Luke chapter 9. You know, Luke chapter 9, because the elect, they will be saved out of Jacob's trouble. And we don't know who the elect is. You know, you could be the elect. You know, I could be the elect. I may not be the elect. I don't know. We don't know. You know, we hope and pray that we are. That's why we say hopeful elect. You know, hope and pray that the brother that's asking about Jacob's trouble is of the elect. We don't know. You know, the Lord hasn't revealed that manner to us. But in due time, it will be revealed. And the Lord also said in 2nd Esdras, during this time of the ultimate test being put on the earth, because we all will be tested. You know, we all will be tested. And the Lord said, in that day, you will know whom my chosen is. In that day, you will know who the elect is. So Luke chapter 9 in verse 27, and it reads, it says, but I tell you of a truth, there be some standing here which shall not taste of death till they see the kingdom of Most High God. And so that is a representation to what we just read in Matthew 16 and 18, as well as an echo according to Jacob's trouble. You know, the elect won't be wiped out. They're going to be reserved. They're going to be protected. You know, they're going to be protected from all wickedness being done to them in that day. You know, now going back to Jeremiah, let's go back to Jeremiah chapter 30 and verse 7. Read this one more time. Jeremiah chapter 30 and verse 7. And it reads, it says, alas, for that day is great, so that none is like it. It is even the time of Jacob's trouble, but he shall be saved out of it. You see that? So let's go to Daniel 12 and 1, because Daniel also talks about this Jacob's trouble. So Daniel chapter 12 and verse 1, and it reads, and it says, and even at the top, I'm not sure about your Bible, but even at the top of mine, it says a time of trouble. Now, Daniel chapter 12, verse 1, and it says, and at that time, so like I jammed up the backup channel camera. Daniel chapter 12 and verse 1. So it says, and at that time, shall Michael stand up. Now, who is Michael? Michael is a top angel. You know, and the Lord, hey, he's going to allow his angels to do his might, do his will, you know, to come on the earth and perform all of his things that he predestined to take place. Now, let's go to Hebrews chapter 1 real quick. Hebrews chapter 1, and I want to start at verse, I'm going to start at verse 7, get straight to the point. Hebrews chapter 1 and verse 7, it says, and of the angels, he said, who make it his angels spirits and his ministers a flame of fire. So a minister is somebody that serves. So the Lord is going to use an angel to protect the elect of the Israelites. All right. So Daniel, going back to Daniel chapter 12. Daniel chapter 12. And I'm going to start at verse 1. And also another precept you can understand in representation how the Lord uses angels. You can go to the book of Tobit chapter 12. I'm going to read it real quick. Get straight to the point. Not trying to take up too much time. Answering the brother question. Now, the book of Tobit in the Apocrypha chapter 12. And I'm going to start at verse 15. This is another angel. Tobit chapter 12 and verse 15. It says, I am Raphael, one of the 7 holy angels, which present the prayers of the saints, and which go in and out before the glory of the Holy One. So, hey, you got angels that do things as far as present prayers. They are set up to protect. They're set up to defend and to do the work of the Most High, you know. So going back to Daniel chapter 12 and verse 1, it says, and at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince, which standeth for the treasure of thy people. So the only people that is going to be saved in that day are the people of the Most High, you know, which we know to be the so-called Blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans. But not all so-called Black, Hispanic, and Native Americans. Only the elect, those that are repentant, those that are striving to keep the commandments, those that have faith and hope in the Lord. Because like it says in Ephesians, you will be saved by hope. Let me see if I can remember where that precept is. This is Ephesians chapter 2. And I'm going to start at verse 7. Ephesians chapter 2 and verse 7, and it reads, it says that in the ages to come, he might shew the exceeding riches of his grace. So a grace is a gift, you know, in his kindness toward us through Hamashiach Yahushua. It says, for by grace are ye saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It is the gift of the Most High God. You see that? So I also wanted to get I want another precept too. That's another precept I'm thinking about. You know, so not everybody is going to get salvation and redemption in that day. Let me see. It's another precept that I want to get. So like, let me see if I can remember this precept. Now this is Romans 8. This is the book of Romans chapter 8. And I'm going to start at verse 24. Romans 8 and 24. Justin Humphrey said, happy Sabbath. Bless my brother. All praise to the Most High. All praise to the Most High. All praise to the Most High. Shalom, Justin Humphrey. So this is Romans chapter 8 and verse 24. It says, for we are saved by hope. So you got to have hope. You got to have faith in these days, in these last days. You got to have faith and hope that the Lord is going to redeem you, you know. And that's why also in Jude verse 3, it says, contend for the faith, you know. So, hey, somebody that wants to be delivered, don't know when the Messiah gonna come back. Hey, they gonna have hope. You know, I hope the Lord is gonna save me. You're not like a Christian. You're not going around saying you're saved, sanctified, and filled with the Holy Spirit. You know, how are you saved when Jacob's trouble ain't even came yet? You know, how you saved when martial law hasn't even taken place yet? You know, you're gonna have Israelites that need to be redeemed and saved out of martial law. You know, but that's a little too high for Christians because they practice religion. You know, and a lot of them don't even understand that. They don't even know they're practicing religion. They don't even know, according to the spirit of truth, that they're practicing paganism. You know, because they're blind. The blind is leading the blind. You know, so going back to Romans chapter 8 and verse 24, it says, "For we are saved by hope, but hope that is seen is not hope. For what a man said, why doeth he yet hope for?" So you're not going to see your way out of Jacob's trouble. You're not going to see how you're going to make it through the next day. You're just going to hope. You got to have faith, you know. That's Deuteronomy 18 and 15. The Lord raised them up a prophet. You know, that prophet that Moses told us the Lord is going to raise up in Deuteronomy 18 and 15 is him that we got to look towards, which is Christ, Yahweh Shah, Hamashiach, you know, as it also states in Deuteronomy 18 and 18, you know. So going back to Daniel chapter 12 verse 1, it says, "And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince, which standeth for the children of thy people, and there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book." And that book, you can read about that in Revelation. You know, you can read about that in Revelation, the book of life. So, hey, the Lord has an election that's going to get delivered out of that. That's what we're talking about. You know, and this is a time that the Lord is going to redeem Israel from their troubles. All right. So let me get I may have to do a lesson on this. I may not be able to go into all of the precepts that I want to go into, but let's go to Revelation chapter 7. May have to do a lesson on this. I'm not sure if I got one on the channel or not. But Revelation chapter 7, you know, we're going to wind down through the spirit and the power of Yahweh Shemel Shah. Revelation chapter 7 and verse 14, and it reads, and it says, "And I said unto him, Sir, thou knowest." And he said to me, I'm going to start at verse 13, Revelation chapter 7 and verse 13. And it reads, "And one of the elders answered, saying unto me, What are these which are arrayed in white robes, and whence came thou? And I said unto him, Sir, thou knowest. And he said to me, These are they which came out of great tribulation." You see that? So the Lord is going to bring the elect out of great tribulation, "and have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb." You see that? So you're going to have certain men, women, and children that's going to go through great tribulation, you know. Now, I want to get Deuteronomy chapter 4. Let's get Deuteronomy real quick before we wind down. Deuteronomy chapter 4, and I want to start at verse 30. And it reads, I'm going to start at verse 29. Deuteronomy 4 and 29. It says, "But if from thence thou shalt seek the Lord Yahweh, thy most high God, thou shalt find him, if thou seek him with all thy heart and with all thy soul, when thou art in tribulation." So even in tribulation, you got to seek the Lord. "And all these things are come upon thee, even in the latter days." You know, it says even in the latter days. So even in the times we're living in, and right before the Messiah comes back, "even in the latter days, if thou turn to the Lord thy God, and shalt be obedient unto his voice, for the Lord thy most high God is a merciful God. He will not forsake thee, neither destroy thee, nor forget the covenant of thy fathers, which he swore unto them." So even in Jacob's trouble, you know, the Lord will remember his covenant, and the Lord will remember, you know, the promises that he had promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and he will cover thee. That's why you should not only seek the Lord now, but even in difficult times, when your back is against the wall, if a man loses his wife, if a man's wife cheat on him, or if a woman husband kind of beats on him, or whatever the case may be, you lose your job, you lose your car, you're going through hell and high water, you still got to call upon the Lord. You still got to believe on the Lord, because even in Jacob's trouble, you're gonna have to seek the Lord. So Lord willing, that answers your question. Lord willing, I can do a video going more in depth on Jacob's trouble. Let me get this in Isaiah before we close out. This is the book of Isaiah. And Lord willing, everybody that commented, I have gave a sense to your comment and gave a notion, lack of words to say, to your comment, or gave a response to your comment. You know, Isaiah chapter 26 and verse 3, it says, thou will keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee, because he trusted in thee. So keep your mind stayed on the Lord in these last days. You know, that's what's going to help you. That's what's going to help you have peace. That's what's going to keep you rooted, grounded, and anchored in the Most High. You know, verse 4, Isaiah 26 and 4, trust ye in the Lord Yahweh forever, for in the Lord Yahweh is everlasting strength. So the Lord can strengthen you, you know, if you're constantly asking him to increase you, build you up, asking him to not take his Holy Spirit away from you, asking him to forgive you for your errors and your shortcomings, you know, asking him to not allow presumptuous and secret faults overthrow you, you know, asking him to take away that lustful demon, asking him to take away that covetous demon, asking him to forgive you for the covetousness and forgive you for the idolatry that you was bound in, you know. So Lord willing, this was edifying to you. Fisherman for Zion. We don't count this as a light thing to do. All praise, glory, honor to Yahweh by Shem Yahweh Shah HaMashiach. Lord willing, you kept the Sabbath as mighty as possible. And Lord willing, you could continue to strive and endure in these last days. And Lord willing, you get your households in order. And yourself, it starts with you first through the spirit and the power of Yahweh by Shem Yahweh Shah. Peace and blessing to you. Shalom.